Hi, I'm Susanna Clark, and welcome to our Leading for Business Excellence podcast. Our podcast brings inspiring stories from across the globe and a multitude of different sectors with great leaders who share their experience and what business excellence means to them. In this episode, I'm joined by Tim Schmeisser, who is VP of Commercial Transformation for Kimberly-Clark. What I really enjoyed about listening to Tim describe his career and his tips on leadership are his thoughts on developing relationships and the nuances of building and leading a global team. He talks with passion about learning, but also about learning even if you fail. And of course, we all know we do have our failures. So it's great to hear his thinking on what you can take away from that and what can make you a better leader. He also talks about ultimately the responsibility of a leader is to build trust with his team to deliver value for the organisation and the customers of the organisation. Do listen out to his advice at the end of the podcast about what it means to be a great leader. Thank you again for listening, and I do hope you enjoy this episode. Good morning, Tim, and thank you for joining us today. I'm particularly chuffed that you're joining us on your birthday. That's very kind of you.
That's okay.
I'd like to start off with you just giving us a brief introduction to yourself, if you would, and a summary of your career.
Sure. So I'm Tim Schmeisser. I'm 44 years old today.
Congratulations.
And I'm currently the Vice President of Commercial Transformation at Kimberly-Clark, working in the digital technology solutions function. So essentially, I've spent most of my career working in consumer packaged goods. And the majority of that has been in the technology, IT space, leading transformations, small, medium, larger, and got bigger and more substantial as I've progressed in my career. I joined Unilever, which is another big consumer packaged goods company, in 2002. Having been to university and studied physics, I kind of fell into it, really. I left university with a degree and an idea of nothing what was going to happen next. I really hadn't planned beyond university. So I took some time out, went traveling, and then came back and really sort of fell into IT and fell into consumer packaged goods. Unilever was one of the first companies that I got the interview for. I liked the people I met. And I think that was probably the thing that kickstarted my career, working for a really big multinational with a very significant investment in people and training investment in me as a leader. That really gave me the foundations for, I think, there's been the success in my career. And I spent 17 years at Unilever doing a variety of different roles, some in the local markets. So I worked for the Unilever Foods business when I first joined, so brands like PG Tips and Knorr, Flora margarine, those kind of things, and working in how does technology support those functions and those brands to make sure that when you pick it up in the supermarket, everything's been delivered in the most efficient and effective way. And from there, just really moved into bigger and more expansive roles, looking after different functions within the company, so finance, supply chain. But I think I've spent the most of my time working very closely with the consumer-facing parts of the business. So that's technology to support how we engage with consumers through digital, e-commerce, marketing in general, and have a really strong passion about that engagement with consumers. And part of the reason I've stayed in consumer packaged goods is really the nature of what we do as companies, whether that's Kimberly-Clark where I work now or Unilever previously, is pretty straightforward. We make products hopefully at an affordable price to meet people's needs, and we do that at scale, and we make some profit, makes profit for the shareholders. But generally, I understand what we do, and we try to do that in the best way possible. I think as an industry and in the company I work for now, that's certainly a big part of my passion for working there, is that commitment to providing essentials for people in every sort of situation across the globe. Yeah.
And you said that you didn't have a plan. You were doing physics at university, didn't have a plan for what life after university would look like. But if I'd bumped into you when you were a teenager, what would you have said you wanted to be?
Probably in a band or something. I couldn't. I couldn't play the guitar. I played the guitar, but I couldn't really play the guitar. And I played piano. I don't know. I think if you asked me as a teenager, I would probably grunt at you.
Yeah.
And I had lots of interests. I liked sort of sport. I liked really liked music, especially going to gigs and that kind of thing. But I just knew that I wanted to do something. I'd be honest, I knew I wanted to do something in business.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have told you what. I didn't have that train driver, or maybe when I was a smaller child, maybe I would have said, I wanted to be a train driver or whatever. But I did physics, not really thinking I was ever going to be a rocket scientist, or I was just interested in the subject and interested in the challenge of it. And I think if I look back, what have I enjoyed doing in my career? Big part of it is solving problems and doing complicated things and simplifying them for people. And one of the big influences on me, my uncle is actually a professor. I think he's since retired, but one of the things that I really remember is his ability to explain complicated things and simplify them. And that's something I think has been part of my career success, is that ability to take something quite complicated or something that's perceived as complicated in terms of technology and IT and simplify it for people so they can understand it, and also so we can progress things and help those transformations and other things I've led land, is really simplifying things for people and actually making it more about the people and the process rather than the technology and the complication of that, focusing much more on the simplification and the outcomes you get from using the technology. So that probably goes more than answers the question, but that's where I think it's that complicated things, trying to understand them and then be able to explain them in a simple way. Is probably part of why IT attracted me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I completely, in the context of business excellence, that simplification of what that means to people. And you've talked about transformation, and doing bigger and bigger transformations, that can feel quite overwhelming for the people in an organization. So I think that ability to simplify and get down to, well, what does that mean for them specifically? That's a real art. So
definitely.
a great skill.
Yeah. I think one of the other things sorry, go ahead.
No, go on, you go.
No, I was going to say one of the other things that I think with any transformation, it's keeping it focused on what actually is going to change. Yes. And in all these things, it's really the individual that changes, or the organization that changes. And I think a lot of times companies get obsessed with technology, not necessarily obsessed with the transformation that needs to take place. And putting technology first quite often is the biggest mistake. So I often find I'm the one in meetings saying, well, let's not focus on the technology. We can come to that later. Let's focus on the problem or the opportunity we're trying to solve, which has felt strange during my career. But that, I would say, again, that's one of those things that repeatedly happens, is getting people within business functions or different areas of the companies I've worked for to elevate themselves up from worrying about the solution to actually talk about the problem first, or the opportunity, and then work their way towards a solution, rather than we need this thing because of this, rather than we actually have got this problem, how do we solve it, or we need to transform, how do we do it? So yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Regular conversations with clients, friends even, who are, well, absolutely, this is the answer. And when you start to ask the question, so we use the term, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Actually, well, we're trying to accomplish the implementation of that system. Well, actually, no, you're not. You're trying to answer what the problem is. Their ability to describe the problem sometimes can be really challenging for them. So that's quite interesting that you use that technique and the impact that that has on the people, to understand what the change is that's coming and why that change is coming for them. So what that approach for you, what have you found has been different in terms of working with the people in your system?
Well, I think one of the leadership approaches I've always taken, and I think it's because when I started at Unilever, it's quite a relationship orientated organization, very matrix. So to get stuff done, you can have great ideas, but if you really didn't invest in relationships and people, you would kind of fail. It was um, Kimberly-Clark, Unilever is an Anglo-Dutch company, so um, had an interesting dynamic of British, Britishness, if you like, of how things wouldn't be said, and Dutch, which was very direct about you knowing exactly where you were in meetings with people because of that cultural difference. So I think that relationship, and starting with that relationship, merely means you can have a more robust conversation with those people about the problem or the thing they're trying to solve, and that relationships would be what for me has been a success and or failure. The things that have failed in my career have been more of a failure has been when we've had to do something even though I don't agree necessarily with the approach because the relationship has not allowed us to get the right foundations in place for a project or a transformation or transformational program. And it's largely where people have said, this is the thing we're doing today. We just need to change the technology, or we understand we've got to change the technology because it's old or it's got to be changed. We don't want to change the process. We want to do it exactly the same way as we do it today. I think those are the projects that have been delayed. People have hated the system at the end of it, and it's been very difficult. Whereas the ones that have been successful is where we've said, just start with a white sheet of paper. What is it we're trying to do, and what is the outcomes we're trying to get to, and then you almost build the system backwards. You start with outcomes and the things you're trying to drive, and then you work back from that. And I think that is the difference. If I look at all of it's not all of the failures I've had. I've had lots of failures, but I have. I think working in a complicated function like IT, it never goes live on time. So you could say every project's a failure. I have gone live with projects on time and on budget, but generally you always make compromises because you have an idea. In practice, you have to have those compromises to make it work, and then it takes longer to get to the benefits than people expect. That's just generally the nature of these complicated changes, and it's normally the people aspect of that change that takes the longest. So getting people to actually really understand how they get the benefits from the new process or the new system. I'm not sure if I've answered the question, Susanna. I think I got lost there, but yeah, that's I think what has been crucial is the relationships and people,
Yeah.
and keeping that focus on people, whether it's retailers or customers we work with or consumers or employees that are going to use the system. It's just understanding them as best as you can and keeping that central. When you lose sight of that, you generally sometimes seem to have much more issues, I would say.
Definitely. And I mean, obviously, we all have our failures in our careers, don't we? We have moments that we look back and think, goodness, I wish I'd started somewhere else with that. But there is that sense of learning from failure. You know, every inventor rarely invents something first time round that works. Every leader rarely comes up with the perfect answer first time. It's what we do with the failure that counts. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. The the failures in my career or the learning points have actually accelerated, I think, where I've got to.
Mm,
The key thing being having some time to grieve if something goes wrong, but not dwelling on it too much, but spending much more time reflecting on what we
mm.
could have done differently.
Yeah, definitely.
And the one thing I don't think is almost enough time put into projects or transformations or programs or anything, even an ongoing process, is that reflection and learning time, or a post go live review or a post project review. Those can be the most valuable things from a career perspective. I also believe that some of the best experiences I've had have been on the most difficult, challenging projects.
Yes.
And I talk about projects. A lot of my career has been focused on in IT has been focused on delivering a system or a portfolio of projects. So therefore, it having those moments of 3 months, 6 months, 4 years, whatever the duration of that is, within that time period. Sometimes the best ones are the ones that are the most difficult and that go the
Mm.
most go not that go the most wrong, but have the most challenges, because that's the ones I've learned from the most. Um,
Yes, there's often a sense of, phew, thank goodness that's over. Let's go on now. But you're absolutely right. Actually, that the point of phew, that's over, that's great. But then let's reflect, as you say, let's learn from it and understand, because it does make us better leaders, for sure.
And the leadership position you take on some things changes. That I've been on some projects where it's almost like a seizure mentality, where the motivation of the team is almost, nobody wants the project, but we've got to make it a success.
Yeah.
All the way through to the opposite, where it's everyone's really inspired by the vision, and everybody wants to do this thing, and there's lots of momentum. And you need to kind of get a dynamic as well that works for the team of people that are working on it, so they feel motivated and inspired, even if it is a tougher project versus something that's going really smoothly.
Mm. You mentioned in your introduction that one of the great things about starting your career at Unilever was that they invested in you, and invested in you as a leader. Can you tell us a bit about that sort of learning to be a great leader, as it were?
Yeah, so from the get go at Unilever, I joined on a graduate scheme where I was basically thrown into a job from day one, with responsibilities and expectations, but with a very good support network. So I got actual training on things like how the business worked and leadership and management and IT and all the different parts I needed from a actual how to do things. But it was actually the on the job. We're going to give you responsibility and drop you in the deep end, but with some stabilizers around you.
Mm,
I think that helped me learn that. And that every 6 months when I joined, this is a long time ago now, but every 6 months we were moved into a different rotation in different parts of the business, different parts of IT. So you got to know lots of people, but also let you see actually the thing you learned in your last placement or rotation you could take forward.
mm,
And I quickly got a sense of actually it's not that different doing different jobs and different roles. There's lots of transferable things. And from a leadership perspective, I've gone into my career and I've not done jobs for that long. Maybe the last role I had at Kimberly-Clark was 4.5 years. That's far and away the longest role I've had. And I think as you get maybe more senior, you have to stay longer to actually achieve the goals you set yourself or the
yeah.
organisation set you. But I think I've moved fairly frequently every 18 months to 2 years in my earlier part of my career, and that the part of that is that learning desire to learn. I almost feel as though after 12 to 18 months, I would be at a point where I was getting bored probably because I'd got what I needed from it, and the actual I'd done the piece of work or we'd achieved what we need to achieve. As I've got more developed in my career, you have more to do and more goals you set and more sort of sphere of influence. But yeah, that's what I've learned. And I think I also was invested. I'm a fully qualified management accountant, which at the time it's like, why are they making me do this? But Unilever invested that in me at the time, and actually, in the nature of what I do, having a really strong financial foundation
Mm.
in accountancy has really helped with a lot of the project management, as well as a lot of my stakeholders tend to be CFOs and finance people because of the investment that's placed in big technology projects.
And business excellence has played a part in your career as well, hasn't it? From an improvement perspective.
Yeah, yeah, I think the idea that we need to I think in every role I've done, there's this concept in my mind that we can do this better and we should be aiming to be the best or better than we are. So I always go into any role thinking we could do this better or the team can do this better. So I think aspiring for that excellence is a key part of actually working in technology, because you deliver a system and everyone's like, brilliant, we're going to get all these benefits. And then in 3 years' time in the same area, you might want to do another system. Um,
Mm,
and that's how it historically has been. But over time, as the technology kind of industry has changed, we have this concept of products now, and it's very similar to some of the supply chain excellence you'll see, where we're constantly look to innovate on the product being the system, but innovate that product, release new features. And if you look in the external world, like with applications like Spotify and things that we have in our day-to-day life, they're releasing updates every day almost to the extent where it gets annoying. You've got to keep on updating the app almost. But that's the change, I think, and business excellence is about in technology certainly is how do we keep on making the system or the capability better. And historically, maybe you would launch a system and then let it depreciate for 5 years, then come back to it.
Mm.
Nowadays, the real approach is actually, no, we're launching it, and that's just the start of the work, and then we're going to continue to optimize it and make it better. And I think that's certainly the sphere I work in. Business excellence is about doing that, but constantly reviewing where you are, not accepting that we've done this now, we can move on. It's actually constantly looking for improvement, constantly looking for opportunity, and at a broader level, from a business perspective, making sure that you've got an external focus and you don't get lost in just the internal focus as well. Looking at the marketplace, looking what other companies are doing, not only in your own industry but in other industries, and seeking for inspiration elsewhere. The thing that gets me most excited is when we do something that really drives business value as an
Mm.
IT function. And that's when I feel proud that we've done a great job as a team. Is when you see that actually something has driven high value, and it's almost the technology team may not get mentioned, but it's the actual outputs we see from that
Yeah.
transformation. That's the thing that
Fantastic.
gets
Yeah.
me going.
And I know you've recently changed roles and you're now leading a global team. You were leading an EMEA based team. So, out of interest, you know, what have you learned as a leader about the requirements of having, both an EMEA population and then that transition into a global
Yeah.
set of responsibilities?
So I think one of the bigger challenges, that there's two or three different challenges. I would say there's one which is about just culture, and I've experienced this a bit in my career prior to that, where I've worked with global teams. It's really spending time on understanding the individuals in the team or the cohorts of people in the team. I worked a lot in Europe, Middle East, and Africa with Israel, Russia, and some nationalities I've never really had an experience of in my life, let alone career. Um, and there's some very strong cultural differences that it takes a bit of time to get used to. And there's some similarities with certainly Israel. Culturally are very direct. So sometimes as a Brit, that can feel quite a surprise to get really direct,
Yes.
strong feedback. But equally, it's important for that culture. Face to face is very important. So learning how best to understand the culture, especially as relationships and people, is at the center of my leadership success, is really important. So
Mm.
one of the challenges really from Europe, Middle East, and Africa going to global is just I've now got a team in Argentina, I've got a team in India, I have a team in the US. Understanding how best to communicate with them, and also just making sure you make no obvious mistakes around cultural faux pas or things like that. So
Mm.
that's a big, for me, that's the first thing, would be just understanding people and investing in their relationships. The other one is obvious, but just time zone differences and respecting people's um, working life, work life balance. So I work in the UK, which is central in the time zone, but it's a US based company, so we tend to work more US hours. So just making sure that works for people, and you have an honest conversation about boundaries, and for me, it's leading by example as well. So not working weekends, not sending emails out of hours, or if I know people are off on the 4th of July, like this Monday, respecting that. So
Mm.
that would be the second one, is thinking about the time zones and some more of the practicalities. I think the final one, which is a part of the transition. I've got a much bigger team, so actually how you communicate is more of a challenge. So making sure that people can hear and understand and feel part of the team. It's distributed, it's global. We've had the pandemic, so keeping people feeling like a real key part of the team is one of the challenges, versus having everybody in the same office where you can go for dinner, or you can do some sort of team building. That's one of the challenges, and using different techniques like quizzes online and things that may seem a bit, when you do them at the time, may seem a bit, is this going to work? But actually, things that get people talking and discussing things beyond the work setting are great. And next year, hopefully, um, we'll be doing a lot more travel to try and meet some of those teams. And in my role in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, prior to the pandemic, I did lots of travel, and actually meeting people a couple of times is good. I think the challenge with travel is getting the right balance from an environmental standpoint.
Yeah.
Plane travel is not great, so getting that right balance, but equally FaceTime is really important. So it's getting the
Mm.
right balance, I think.
Mm. I really appreciate what you're saying about this, uh, the fact that it's our responsibility as leaders for us to understand those people and for us to adapt our style. It isn't the other way round. It's really important to get to grips with what are the cultural differences and what are their needs so that we can adapt our leadership style accordingly. And that actually that is part of being a leader, is that ability to adapt.
Yeah, the definition of like the leadership style I exhibit is this servant-based approach, which really just trying to make an environment where my teams can be successful. Um, and a big part of a leader's role, in my view, is about setting the culture, setting the tone, removing the barriers, and creating the environment for success. And leading by example is a big part of that. If I join a call and go straight into work stuff and don't talk about my family, the weekend, all the other things that are important that are also part of my life, it's very it doesn't set the culture I want to work in, but it doesn't set the culture for the team to understand actually you're at work and that's part of a much broader set of things you do. If you're going to be successful at work, that broader set of things needs to be in balance, and that's a really big part of my leadership journey as I've gone through my career, is just acknowledging that more, especially when people are remote working. I think it's really easy when people are in the office with you and you can see, John, why are you here so late? It's 10 o'clock or it's 9 o'clock or it's whatever time it is. Why are you in the office? You don't see that when everyone's remote and we've got people across the globe. You don't always understand the personal situation they might be in. So create an environment where people can talk about those things. And it's okay to say, I need some time off because my son's ill or my mother's, not very well. Whatever the thing might be, I think that's really important. And that leadership, leading by example, is a really big part of that.
You mentioned in your introduction, and you've just been talking about the culture and environment in which you're working with. Kimberly-Clark, part of the mission statement is we aim to make lives better, and along with the smallest environmental footprint. I was interested, we talked before about what that means to you in terms of your choice for where you work and what you do. But I'm interested also in what that means to you in terms of the leadership decisions that you make and how you move forward and how you reconcile those with the mission of the organization you're working with.
So if I go back to, it's almost just what we just talked about. So I think the word better or best, or, I think there's, in my own personal purpose, I actually really care about what I do, but what we do as a company and how that impacts our consumers, customers, and the world outside. And the way I look at it, if I can make things better in every aspect of my kind of work, and don't settle for things just being the same, then we can, as a wider organization, that can have an impact. So the way I look at it internally with employees, if you like, is how do we make sure that they have the best experience they can have, and get the best out of themselves. It also means we have to, when we're talking about the wider kind of societal stuff, a lot of what we do in IT supports our brands and our categories to drive that. But we also need to ask ourselves the same questions around, is this the right thing to do from a sustainability point of view? Are we doing this in the most simple, straightforward way we can? I think there's a big role that IT can play in that simplification. I think broader than Kimberly-Clark, I've got a personal view that industry has a massive role to play in society. And that's why I like Kimberly-Clark. And also when I worked for Unilever, was a big part of believing that they had a role to play in society. And it wasn't just about shareholders. It's about stakeholders, of which shareholder is one. But obviously the wider stakeholders of the company is the people and the planet. So I think it's important. I think it's sometimes more of a challenge when you're a big company to be seen to be doing that. And I think all I can do in my role is to make sure that we're making the right choices and putting the right focus on that. And I think that's that vision that we have as a company vision is a big statement to move that forward.
Indeed. Going back to what you were saying about building relationships, I know one of the things you don't like is small talk. So I wondered if you could tell me a bit about how you've overcome that challenge in terms of obviously building relationships both internally and externally.
Yeah, I'm the sort of person that once I know somebody quite well, are very chatty and very, you know, um, effervescence maybe too strong a word. I'm certainly not effervescent, but I'm very chatty and easy to get along with. But I find that first 5 minutes of meeting somebody, especially at conferences or big work events, just really uncomfortable. And I
Mm.
think I've always found that. I think from a university school, meeting people for the first time has never been something I've been that comfortable with. So the small talk, especially, I find like really can be quite boring, feel quite rote, like you learn by rote. But actually, what I've learned is actually it's if you don't have it and you don't have some sort of a patter and a set things you say to people, it's actually more difficult.
Yes.
So what I've learned to, even though I don't like small talk, I've learned to kind of accept actually you need that to break the ice with people. And some of it is almost at events. I'd historically tend to maybe speak to one or two people and then go back to the people I know. I try and almost gamify it a little bit now to actually, how do I make sure I meet as many people I don't know as possible? Um, and networking internally and externally from the organization I work for is really a key part of success. And the more senior and the more in leadership positions you get, the more important that is. So I
Mm.
think just it's almost I forced myself to do it, and now it's almost become a natural behavior, even though it would not be my go-to place as a human being.
But there's a lesson in there, isn't there, which is this application. If I go back to the concept of continuous improvement, business excellence, up front for a lot of people, it feels odd to start working in that way, to start thinking about processes, but actually everything is a process, and once you understand that, and then you can repeat the process, you can learn, and then it becomes embedded in our DNA. It becomes muscle memory, and we can just work that way naturally. um, I think creating new habits that is a great challenge for some people, but the persistence to the end goal is what's required to make it much more natural. So glad to hear that the small talks worked for you.
Yeah, but I think your points are valid on a much broader scale around a lot of what we do is, especially with change, is people get into a routine and people like that routine and it's very easy, it's automatic. When you change something like a process or a system, people automatically going to hate it to start off with. Even if it's better,
Mm,
it's because it's a change. I think that human nature um, is often overlooked. Why can't people just get on with it, or why can't people just it's a brilliant system or it's a brilliant process, but actually there's a real human angle to it. And if you look back at yourself, what are the things you feel uncomfortable doing or don't like doing, it's very difficult to overcome them. It could be a fear of flying or any of these things that you have.
mm,
How do you come over them? And some of it is just rinse and repeat, keep on doing it,
yeah.
and start doing it and then just keep doing it. And the more you do it, the more it becomes second nature. And that's the case with lots of change.
Mm,
Getting people to take that first step of doing it is often the
yes.
hardest part. Yeah.
Yes. Um, you've talked a lot about different types of the build of your career through the graduate program and training and so on. But who would you say, or what would you say, has had the most significant influence on you as a leader?
I think in my career, I've had a number of mentors, or formal and informal mentors, that have really helped me, give me the confidence. I would say, actually, even though I've been through quite a structured, kind of accelerated leadership program, if you like, that helped me get to the next step. I have quite often questioning myself and have that. I think it's classic, like not full imposter syndrome, but that kind of, am I good enough?
Yeah.
And I think often the mentors I've had in my career have been really important to either give me direct feedback that I need to hear, positive and negative, or just give me that support and somebody to talk to outside of my day to day to give me a reality check or a sense of where I am. So I think that's been really important to me. And there's been a number of different leaders, some of which I've worked for, some of which have been other people I've had a chance to speak with who don't work directly with me, but have been somebody that I've known throughout my career. So I think that's been really important. I also think outside of work, having a family and being based in that reality also helps. You leave work and it can be quite stressful, and it can seem quite like the world's going to end because it's been a bad day, or you can feel 10 foot tall because you've had a really good day, you present to the board. Coming home to the reality of a wife and 3 kids and all of the domestic stuff, actually, that's really helped as well. And that may sound strange, but that grounding in reality of why am I doing all this also helps me ground myself when I'm there. But I think the mentor really, there's a couple of people at Unilever that were very important in my career who helped me. One really was almost good cop, always gave me strong positive feedback, always telling me how great I was doing, which was great. But I also had someone else who was probably more the opposite side, which was, you're doing a great job, but these are some of the things you could do better. It's almost very different points of view, but both really helped me because I need to be built up.
Yes.
But also need to have somebody give me what's really been beneficial in my career is when people give you really honest feedback about what you do well and what you need to either stop doing or improve on. And I really appreciate people make the time to give you that feedback. It's not always an easy thing to do, but actually it means they care, and actually it really has helped me, I think, in my career. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, Suzanne, but
No,
that for me has
definitely.
been the things that have helped the most. Yeah.
I think that that it is quite a temptation sometimes as a leader, perhaps to be moving forward. And I'm not saying all leaders are command and control by any stretch of the imagination, but actually, both the sense of being grounded through your external life to work, but also it's through your internal life by having people around you who you can trust and who are willing to give you good feedback, and being willing to ask for that feedback too. I know that's something that I try and remember to do, is to say, if you could give me some examples of what you think is going well, but also what I could do better, what I could do differently, that would be really helpful for me. And it's remembering to do that and taking the time to do that with people who can be honest and constructive with you. I think that's truly valuable. So you've had mentors over the years. You had coaching as well?
Yeah. I've had a variety of different coaching over the last 10 years, probably. So
Mm-hmm.
from when I first moved to sort of director level positions at Unilever, I had some different kinds of coaches. I had an actual executive sort of coach for a period of time, and then we did training sessions where you created sort of support groups with other leaders, which also I found useful. And currently, I've got an executive coach, which is really, a lot of the time, it's an independent voice to help bounce things off. And that's again really useful, especially transitioning roles.
Yes.
I'm currently going through quite a structured 100-day plan for onboarding into my new role. Just having someone there that's experienced, that worked with other leaders of going through that process, just means you have an acceleration because you've got somebody who can talk about how other people have done it or how other
Yeah.
companies do it. And that's been really helpful. And just, I personally find having an independent voice that's got no context quite often, or limited context, is probably more helpful than I'd imagined, actually, when I first started doing it. So yeah, I think coaching is good. I think also investing time in coaching others is something that actually helps you with your own leadership. So if you're coaching somebody, that's not something you do, but you're telling them to do it, it also helps you say, look, next time I do that, I should listen to my own advice, sort of thing.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, executive coaches and coaching generally, but just continued investment in training. As you get more senior, you may feel as though you know it all. I feel as though every day I learn something, and investing the time in learning things as you continue in your career is important, and not forgetting that, and not sort of settling, not ever thinking I know it all. I think is the one thing I would say. I think on a daily basis, I feels like I know less, especially in the technology world, as it moves rapidly forward.
Does, yes.
Just keeping the finger on the pulse gets more difficult. The more I say, I don't know, the more older you get, but it's just more. I think it's the more senior, more responsibilities you have.
Mm,
You've less focused on one area. It's more difficult to be as expert.
mm,
And in a fast-moving world, that can be a challenge. But the opportunity is really to see what are the things you should be staying abreast of, and how do you do that. And
mm,
a lot of that about having a team of people you can trust, who can give you, who've got expertise and can help you understand the things you need to understand.
mm. Taking that time out as well for things like coaching is I think for me it creates space for thinking, that sometimes when you're on the schedule, as it were, of a daily meetings and uh, networking and planning and strategy, etc., having that maybe an hour and a half on a reasonably regular basis where you meet with a coach or a mentor, and it causes you to really have the space to sit and think, I think is has made a big difference to me.
The other thing I would just add, that something else, it's not coaching, but something that previously used a little bit in my old company at Unilever, and now at Kimberly-Clark, which is just really reflecting on the energies that you need to be successful.
Hmm.
So obvious stuff like getting enough sleep, eating healthily, taking breaks. But as you get more senior into more leadership responsibility, it's very tempting just to sort of try and put your head down and work your way out of problems, or work your way through getting onboarded, as I'm doing right now. The key thing I've learned in my career is actually having that balance, whether it's time to kind of reset mentally, time to kind of go away and emotionally reset, whatever it might be. Having those things within your locker, or your sort of skills, are not something traditionally I think leaders thought about. But actually, for me, those have been really important. And we've talked a lot at Kimberly-Clark in the IT function about the human operating system, and how do we make sure that we do get that balance. Because at times you can, I think, if you're on a project specifically, or you're in an area where there's lots of challenges, it can be very easy to forget to take breaks, and often, or don't sit, especially with the pandemic as well, don't sit at your laptop and
Mm,
then roll straight into have dinner, and then straight back on your laptop or your phone. So there's something around making sure that you make that space, and obviously going and doing coaching, that's a great way of taking your mind completely away from work. But
mm,
there are lots of other ways, I would say. Just going for a walk, just doing something different, going for lunch, things that there's a temptation to have the sandwich at the desk type concept, or I'm going to
yes.
work through lunch. I've found in my career that the more you do that, it pays, you pay for it some other time. If you don't make the space, you either get ill, or you don't think as effective as you could, or you're grumpy, and therefore your leadership impact goes down. So that the other thing I would say is, as well as training and developing yourself, making the space to keep your energy levels, physical, health, as well as that mental health, as well,
Mm,
really important.
mm. I like that human operating system concept. I think that's a great agenda item. Um, what would you say is the best experience you've ever had, of either quality or customer service, where you've been on the other end yourself as the customer?
Probably the best. I went to South Africa for my honeymoon, and I think the level of service you get in a five-star hotel in South Africa, and in general there, is amazing. But that's probably not that everyday customer service you're paying for that. You kind of expect that. So I think maybe that's not a great example. the the kind of customer service which I really like is where you can get your answers really quickly, and it feels
Mm,
as though it's been dealt with in a really effective way. So for me, I don't get frustrated with chatbots and all those things, as long as it all works
yeah.
and it's seamless. And if it doesn't work, they're very quickly then to hand you over to somebody who can help. So for me, great customer service is just availability, to help solve your problem, versus bad customer service is when I'm waiting on the phone for a hell of a long time. So I won't mention who my health insurance provider is, but I phone them up and it's regularly 45 minutes on a phone, and there isn't really any other effective channels. Whereas I forget what it was, something else I was doing the other day where I just literally chatted with somebody. It was my insurance actually. And I won't mention the insurance company, but it was a major UK insurer. But it was just really quick. I did chatted with them on chat. It was firstly like a chat bot, then it was quickly a person, and I didn't have to speak to somebody on a phone call. They just were very easy and quick to give me an answer. So I think that it's accessibility to actually the information, and where you need help, it's somebody there. I think that's what good looks like to me. And there are different elements of customer service. If you're in a restaurant, it's very different to maybe what you expect from a mortgage provider or more of a service provider. But certainly from a service provider, that's what I expect. Just you access to the information and quick access to answers.
Because our patience isn't necessarily high in those situations, is it? You know, we've got a problem usually, which is why we're reaching out to contact somebody, and therefore the anxiety associated with that can increase the longer it takes to get an answer.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah, and I also have had historically when I was at university, I've worked in customer call centers in my summer holidays and things like that to earn money. I just know how badly trained the staff are on all of those utility companies, and not badly trained, but there's a big turnover of people because there are lots of so I think it's having worked on the other side. I know if I go into a call center, it's kind of hit or miss whether you're going to get a really good person or somebody that's there, as a part-time worker who maybe isn't that as engaged as they would be otherwise. So I think companies that really instill that value as well, and actually customer service is part of the brand of the company. That's the experience people have when they engage with you. Often it's customer service, and the same we're actually working internally within IT. Obviously, a lot of times the IT help desk or the IT person that comes and fixes your laptop is your experience of IT. So you can have brilliant leaders, but actually if you really underinvest in the quality of your customer service, actually everyone's impression is that it's a terrible, the IT function is terrible. So both internally and I would say externally the same kind of thing.
If someone came to you and they were looking for some advice on what makes a great leader, what would you say?
I think the first thing is just being approachable and listening. If the team don't feel like you're approachable and they can just reach out to you, and that you listen, I think that's the first thing. Would just be you're not creating the culture where you're going to make people successful, because as a leader you've got to create the culture. And for me, that listening and understanding is where it starts, and from that you form relationships, and from that you hopefully set a tone around a workplace and a culture which is going to make everybody be successful. And that's about inclusivity, diversity, all those things. But creating fundamentally an environment where people can be themselves and be successful. For me, that's the role of the leader. Is if I can make everybody in my organization 1, 2, 10, 5%, whatever the right thing is, better than they were before, that will hopefully make them more successful, which will help them in their career, but also help the organization be more successful. So, but it all starts for me with listening and being approachable. And that sort of people orientation is kind of the big part of my leadership style, and being authentic as well. So people know who you are. They know, I know what Tim's about. I know what, I know that he's got my back, or I know that he's going to be a guy that I can trust. And but for me, that always starts with listening and making time for people. You've got to build that trust. It doesn't get given to you as a right when you're, brought into an organization as a leader. You've got to earn that trust, and but that trust then goes a long way. That goes a long way to your success, in my experience.
Thank you. Tim, thank you very much. It's been really great to have the chance to talk to you about your leadership experience and what it takes to be a great leader. And I thank you very much for taking the time to share that with us today.
That's okay. Thanks, Suzanne. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. What a great note to finish on. Making everyone successful and being a leader that people can trust. I'd like to thank Tim very much again for his time today, and thank you for listening. If you'd like to know any more about us, then please do get in touch. You can reach us on pmi.co.uk. We love to talk, so please email us team@pmi.co.uk. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.